right, I think we're all here.
We are.
Except for Joe, but he's out.
He's out of town. Tonight's work session is a discussion of the board with regard to the advisory committee resolutions. The town board approved at the last meeting, February 27th, an ordinance that creates a uniform process on the formation of committees, the duties and responsibilities of the committees, and procedures to follow by the committees. The next step in this process is to reestablish each of the committees through their each of their resolutions. The town board has not had an opportunity to, as a group, get together and discuss the resolutions and any revisions that you'd like to make to those, and specifically how you want to consider reappointing current members of each of the committees, and trying to maintain a stagger so we have no more than what I think is talked about was no more than 3 members in any one year being reappointed at any one time. So Section 6 specifically deals with this, and staff provided language in there that has a stagger where all the committee members are reappointed. 3 are reappointed to 1-year terms, the next 3 are reappointed to a 2-year term, and the final 3 would be reappointed to a 3-year term, and that would create the stagger. And then we would refer to the ordinance for any reappointments as those appointments come up in future years, which has 2 3-year terms that a member would be eligible for. Staff needs direction from the board as to how you want to apply the staggers in this initial go-around on reappointing each of the members. We'll take those revisions and come back if there's clear direction at the April 9th town board meeting for final consideration and adoption of each of the resolutions at that meeting. The Recycling and Conservation Advisory Committee, their comments were sent to the board this afternoon. And then the Open Space Advisory Committee sent out last week, Friday I think it was, their comments with regard to their resolution. And then they had comments as well on the ProStack committee for the board to consider. With that, I think I planned on just opening it up to the board to let you have your discussion on each of the resolutions, and if you wanted to make any revisions to those that were included in the packet, and then to discuss the issue of the stagger.
So, Matt, we got the notes from OSAC on ProStack, about ProStack.
Right.
But we haven't had a chance to hear from ProStack on ProStack's resolution.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So you haven't got anything yet?
No.
Okay.
No. But we also let the committees know that the board would be discussing it tonight, and I know there's representatives of that committee here, so if the board wishes, you could.
Sandy?
I think we have 2 really meaty subjects for tonight. I think one is the stagger that transcends all 4 committees, and then the other is the individual authorizing resolution for every committee. So I'd actually suggest we bite off the chunk called the stagger, and thereby I assume it's probably going to take the better part of the hour, and by doing that it then allows ProStack to have one of its meetings in the interim, and ProStack can then get its recommendations to us so that we have the full set of recommendations to consider.
So my only other thought about that is that if we have enough time, then we start to work on the other ones if we do. So, and along your lines, I think maybe at least the way that I thought might be a helpful way is to look at the committee members currently in the 4th page, I think, of this document, and then we can maybe work backwards from that, because there's dates associated with that. And I think the other thing that we need to discuss is whether or not there's a few committees where 2 members we're members on 2 committees, and we need to decide what to do with those as well. So,
and keep in mind that Phyllis emailed out on Friday a revised chart for the board, had 2 revisions to the Open Space Committee, the date of original appointment for Bob McCool was changed to 2001, and for John Nybarger was changed to 2003. Is that correct? So just those two changes.
Okay. So I think we need to decide. So I think John Nybarger and Jim Payne are the only, at least on us, I missed somebody, the two people that are on two committees.
That's correct.
And I think it's the board's pleasure to just have one person, have a person on only one committee. Is that still true?
Correct.
Yeah. So we need to figure out from those two individuals which committee they would want to be on. That might be the first place to start. So I see one. I see both members here. So that might be a good place to start if you feel comfortable speaking to that particular issue.
And the ordinance will be effective April 8th.
Jim Payne, Superior. My assumption has been that we would essentially serve on each other's committee. This started as on the basis where the chairs, in practice, none of this, of course, was in resolutions, but the practice as put forth at the time was that the chair of ProStac would serve on OSAC and vice versa. So when I became chair of ProStac, I was the board automatically, without interview or process, added me to OSAC. So my assumption all along has been that would be the disentanglement of the two.
So that you would be on ProStac.
I would leave OSAC and John would leave ProStac.
Right, and I think it probably does make sense in an ex officio manner, but not to be a voting member. At least that would be my perspective. That communication has been helpful.
Well, the ordinance was passed that dictates this, is my understanding.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think
You're free to attend. You're always free to attend.
Everybody's
Right.
free to attend, but
Well,
I'm just
I-
saying is that an
Okay.
not a, right,
Right.
that would be the ex officio portion of this.
Absolutely. It would
Yeah.
be not unlike a board liaison, even less official than that. They would just.
You'd attend
Correct.
as a resident.
Right.
Yep.
That's my assumption.
ProStac it is. All right, John?
John Nybarger, 1514 Waldona Way. Yes, I'd be happy to continue to serve on OSAC. The history on the having the two members of OSAC on ProStac started in the resolution. It was only because Jim happened to be the chair of ProStac and was also on OSAC, and I happened to be the former chair of ProStac and then the current chair of OSAC that the chairs were on at the same time. But throughout the rest of the time before that, it was just, people sitting on OSAC had designated seats on ProStac. And of course, that's going away. But, so,
Okay,
Right.
thanks.
so that one I think has been put to bed, as they say. So then I guess we had a email from our missing colleague who's, I think, had at least part of it was a very sensible suggestion, which is the longest serving members have the shortest remaining part of the stagger. So longest serving members would have 1 year left, and working down that just based upon dates. So I don't know how people feel about that. I see a general head nod regarding that. Lisa?
I'd sent out a memo suggesting that the committees make recommendation as to who serves how long, because I thought that one, would allow input from the committees, and two, let them help figure out what would make a particularly well-functioning committee. And I thought that automatically dismissing people who had been loyal servants of the town and that sort of thing didn't either serve them well, or particularly the board or the town, as well as taking suggestions from the committee.
Yeah, and fair enough. That was part one of my suggestion. Part two is probably different from others, but Sandy?
I would actually disagree with Lisa that we assign it to the committees to come up with their own selections on who gets what terms. The reason why is we as a board have found it inordinately difficult to deal with this issue when terms expire and whether to reappoint, et cetera. It's a difficult thing. It's very difficult to do without offending someone and creating hard feelings, and I think there is just a real reasonable way to do this without having to possibly go through that. I totally support the idea of the oldest third of the committee getting 1 extra year, the next oldest getting 2 extra years, and the newest third getting 3 extra years. However, in the spirit of the ordinance was written to recognize as a reasonable term of service as 6 years. And I really recommend staying as close to that as possible. We've debated that, I think, quite thoroughly. We, as elected board members who are subject to terms, understand the function of terms. We know when we go into this job that there's an expectation of a length of service. So while I support the 1 and 2 and 3 years, I would actually add to the end of it that when those terms expire, those members who have served less than 6 years when their terms expire will be eligible for another 3-year term. So what that means is if you haven't already served 6 years, you will be eligible for an extra 3-year term. However, if you've served more than 6 years when your 2012 assigned term expires, you will not be eligible for another 3-year term without sitting out 1 year. So I'm trying to stay true to the 6 years of service that we've put into place.
So before we go on, this is my Part B part of that. So sticking with Part A, how do people feel with the staggering based upon the length of service?
Do we have opinions on the length, the stagger, and?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, do you feel like it's a reasonable thing for the people longest serving have the shortest remaining
Yes.
length on the
Yes.
committee?
Yes.
That was, okay?
And then, just for clarification on that, there are a couple instances, as I was going through this, where you have more than one pro stack, I think.
I thought if we
You had-
removed one member, I might have looked at this incorrectly, but if you removed the members, that would work out. But maybe I'm wrong. Tell me what you have found.
So, as I was going through ProStack, for instance, based on the board's discussion, there is 3 members that were appointed this year in 2012, and one of those would get a 3-year term. The other 2 would get 2-year terms. So how?
On which committee? I'm sorry.
On ProStack?
Wait, say that again?
Why is that, Matt?
Well,
It's just how the numbers fall.
Right.
There's nine
Right.
members, right?
Right.
So 3, if they were appointed just new, would have those 3 would have the longest serving terms, right? Then there would be another
Yeah,
group
what would
of
those
3,
three
which
be
would be
for
the
years, though?
medium.
Yeah, they should be eligible for 2 3-year terms.
Well,
Right.
Before we get to the number of additional terms, just who would be appointed? So in
So based on this-
9-member committee
right,
meetings.
based on the discussion you just had, with the longest serving members receiving 1-year terms, and then the next 3 get 2-year terms, you would have Nathan Ruff with a 1-year term, Darryl McCool, 1 year, Jim Payne, a 1 year, and then
So that'd be a
Aaron
group of 3.
Atwill would have a 2-year. And then
Right.
the next 3 that have possibilities for terms are Peter Bottomley, Sandy Hammerly, and Brent Bickle.
Right, so that would be the other tier.
And you would just do those as 3-year terms.
Yeah.
With 1, and so the vacancies would be appointed to a 2-year term.
2-year term.
Okay. All right, just want to
Yeah, that's how so does that make sense to people?
Wait,
Well, so if somebody applied, if somebody applied
Looks like that today.
for one of the vacant positions,
This is gonna
There-
be
which there's
vacant.
two.
Just- it's like a-
say in 2 months we filled that, they would only get a 2-year term?
That's what I'd recommend, just
That was my
to allow
question,
for the
yeah.
stagger.
The reason for that, Chris, is we just had 3 people assigned at the same time, so this person would just be assigned to the fill-in spot, if you will. That Jim would be, that actually John would be
Right.
vacating on ProStack.
Right.
And potentially, we could talk about that when they get appointed, that, like a sitting board member, if you got appointed, you would then get 2 more terms after that. So, just to allow for that stagger to occur.
Okay.
so there would be 2 members that just got appointed 2 months ago that would only get 1 term, and then they'd sit out.
No.
We
No.
didn't, we didn't get to that part. We haven't
I
gotten
was
to the
wrong.
sitting out
Okay.
part yet.
I'm glad I clarified that, because I'm a little confused.
So there's the middle, there's 2 vacancies, there will be 2 vacancies in ProStack that we would need to fill. The suggestion is that would be in the 2 years part of the stagger, but those people would not need to set out and would be eligible for 2 additional terms after that, similar to how the board operates.
Correct.
You could actually...
my understanding.
Yeah, you could actually, if you wanted
Whatever
to,
you said, that's fine.
fit them into the 1-year part of the stagger, too.
No, that's
And then they'd be
Whatever
eligible
he
for
said, no.
2 3-year terms.
Yeah, I don't feel
Either
strongly
which
about it one
way.
way or the other.
But under
Works.
that, though, then those 2 people would potentially have 8 years,
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct, yes.
okay?
But this is what happens to a board member. If somebody were to
Right.
resign and somebody were to be appointed, let's say for another 2 years, for example, then they could still run for 2 3-year terms. So,
Generally, partial terms don't count.
Exactly,
Partial being
right,
anything
right.
less than 3
Like
years.
you.
Right. Chris, that's also why we could put them in...
You never were.
We could put them into the 1-year terms, and then they'd have a 7 years total. So, we can work that out, but,
I'm okay with the 2 years and 2 more terms.
In the ordinance you passed, it specifically states partial terms don't count, so
Right.
just to throw that out.
Correct.
Okay.
And so if people, if you want to put them in the 1-year term, that would be fine, too. I don't have strong
Right.
feelings about it one way or the other.
I think we should keep it consistent, just like we do on the board. Why
Yeah.
not give them 2 years, 2 terms?
Right. That would be my recommendation. Okay.
The only question I had about that is that goes counter to some of the conversations that we've had, that we wanted to stick with 6-year max, and then you would sit out. So if we're going 8 years, then that kind of, to me, that throws a monkey wrench in the whole thing.
Chris-
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's the initial part that just to get the stagger going
Yeah.
is what the,
and the language I proposed said if you have not served 6 at the time your term expires, you're eligible for additional terms. So there will be a little transitioning here
Okay.
at the beginning to where people may have 7.
Even if somebody had 5 years, 1 more term, 3 more years, that's another 8.
Right.
That's the other way you get to 8.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's fine. If we give them a little bit more time, that's okay with me. I just wanted to kind of stick
Yeah.
with the same plan that we had discussed before.
okay? So, not consensus, but general head nodding along those lines. Okay? So now we get to the more difficult one of this. So this is Part B. My Part B is that if you've served more than 6 years, you can have 1 more term, and if you served less than 3, you get somewhere between 3 and 6, you'd serve 1 term, and if you had less than 3, you'd serve 2 more, which is not what other people
Yeah.
But
Agree with.
So if you've served more than 6 years, let's say you've served 7 years, you go until, 3 more years, that makes it 10 years.
correct.
Yeah.
Plus your additional
That's a
1
lot.
year, which would make it 11 years.
Could
You're
be.
saying 1 year plus 3, right?
Well, that defeats
Yeah.
the purpose of the
Yeah.
term.
Well, but if you're fine with 8 years for someone, why wouldn't you be fine with 10 years for someone?
And if you had somebody who was just serving for a few months, do you want to just have them do 1 term?
No.
So there's some dividing line
Yeah.
then there we need to decide. Sandy,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the way in which I would transition the terms, Chris, is I would give the new people the 1-year slots, and then they would serve 7 years, not 8. And that's just the unavoidable consequence here of, because they'd have 1 year plus 2 additional terms, the new appointees. And that's as close to 6 as we can possibly get by virtue of the math working. But right now on our most seasoned committee, which is the OSAC committee, we've got 6 people who've already served between 8 and 10 years. If we add at a minimum 1 plus 3 is 4, those people will have served 12 to 14 years before these spots become open to other interested people in the community. And I just think that goes way beyond the spirit of the resolution, which is really to have a smooth transition. And to me, that transition can be very easily accomplished in 1 year to 2 years. I think it's already been accomplished in just a few months of having the 2 new members of OSAC. I've sat in on the past 2 meetings, and there's a very nice transition already happening within the course. I'm not sure. These 2 new members were appointed in September, so in the course of 6 months, we've had a pretty smooth transition, and I think transitioning the oldest, most experienced members over the course of 2 years will actually be quite smooth. And then I'd like to reiterate, those seasoned members are not being banished. They're only asked to sit out 1 year, and then they can reapply. So that actually provides the assurance that if the rest of the community does not step up, then we certainly have those most seasoned people, if they're still interested, to come back onto those committees.
So that changes then what we. So the shortest would then have the least remaining time, and the most seasoned would have the middle group.
No. If the way in which I see it is, again, I'll repeat my language. When their terms expire, and what I'm calling by their terms is this special 2012 situation in which they each get 1 or 2 or 3 years, with the oldest getting the 1, the middle the 2s, and the newest 3. Those who have not served 6 years when that term expires will be eligible for another 3-year term. So by definition, the newest folks will not have served 6 years. So when their 3 years expires, they will be eligible for another 3-year term. However, the second group, when you add that 2 years to their date of original appointment, if they're beyond 6 years, they are not eligible for a 3-year term.
And
if they're under...
And similarly
with
to
one.
the oldest.
Correct. So in all cases, the newest appointees would have the benefit of their current 6 months plus 3 years, which we're adding now to equalize everything, and then they would be eligible, should they be interested, for another 3-year term. So, for example, on OSAC, 2 people were appointed in September. Basically, the 7 months they've served, well, where are we? What month are we? 6 months served already would basically not count towards anything. From the time we implement this, they get 3 years, being the newest group, and then they would be eligible for 3 years, a 3-year second term. So they would end up serving 6 years and 6 months.
I could
Okay.
just
Yep.
throw one comment in here. That this is all up to you, and it's completely within your discretion. If we make something like that work, we have to go back and revise the ordinance, because the ordinance very specifically says that partial terms do not count toward term limits. So that's fine. We will have to go back and redo the ordinance.
Kendra, I thought I understood you the whole process saying that this special situation created by 2012
Right.
would be dealt with in the resolutions.
Exactly, the 2012 situation. The problem is, in the ordinance, we anticipate dealing with the first terms, the 2012 terms. And then, once we go beyond that, all other terms would be full 3-year terms. The way that we dealt with it in the ordinance is we said any partial term does not count toward term limits automatically. So, but I think what you're proposing is that some of them might count towards term limits, and that's where we would just have to go back and change.
Well, we said we can revisit that at any
Exactly.
point anyway.
Yes.
So if that's necessary, I have no problem doing that.
Right, I just want to bring that to everyone's attention. We would just need to go back and just, it would be a very small edit, but we would just have to edit
Okay.
that part of the ordinance.
And I don't know if this is a typographical error, but there's several committee members whose terms expired in June of 2011.
No.
Many.
We never went back and reappointed anybody because we were going through this process of, we didn't think we thought we'd have it done by now, but, so we didn't reappoint anybody. No reappointments were done in 2011, and none have been done this year as well. So that information's correct.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So they're serving even though their term has expired
Yeah.
by 9 extra months.
Right.
To me, that almost doesn't matter, though, because even if we would have discussed it back then, we probably wouldn't have made any changes.
I just want to make sure what I'm reading is correct.
Okay.
That's all. And by the way, Phyllis has an expiration term as indefinite. What's the deal with that? How did she get that deal?
Well,
It's like-
planning commission, yeah, that's planning commission for
That's
you.
totally different.
It's
Right.
it's in our code, actually.
It's in our code.
So,
It's in the code.
I'm half teasing, but do you remember when you were appointed? You know, so the date of original appointment is a question mark, huh? All right.
I would guess it's been as long as she's been employed by the town.
It goes back to the 80s.
Is that right? She needs a plaque. I'm sorry. Name the building after her.
Phyllis asked for a gold watch, no plaque.
Watch.
All right, let's move on.
So I don't particularly agree with that, but we need to have some general agreement so that staff can put something together. So we're not making motions at the work session here, but if somebody wants to state how they would like this to read.
You've heard from me.
Okay. We've heard from Sandy.
Well, do you want me to, just for the record, state what Trustee Sorelli's suggestion was? Or?
Sure.
But
That'd be
I
great.
spoke to Joe,
Okay.
and if I remember correctly from our conversation, he didn't read the whole thing all the way through. So
Okay.
his initial comments, I don't know if, but again, that's not fair for me to represent him right now, but I think that we should wait to hear from Joe directly.
He also
Well,
responded.
he also replied on Saturday.
Right
though.
there.
He replied since then. So we could read that. That's his latest comments, if you want to read those.
Did you talk to him afterwards?
Not after Saturday.
Okay.
So Saturday is the last communication we've all had. It's if you want to read that.
I don't think I have his email still.
Yeah, so how about,
Okay.
I think this is we
I
do
can
want to just read it? Sure.
I can read it, yeah. Thanks for your view, Sandy. I think you've certainly captured the goals we sought to achieve in adopting term limits. If we were sure that those committee members most affected by this, i.e. the ones who have served the longest in the past, would not believe that this process had targeted them, then I agree with your approach. If there's any doubt about the result, then I would either revert to my suggested or some other compromise position. I'm sorry that I will not be present this Monday, but I'm sure I'll be able to support whatever the board comes up with. Joe.
And I think the previous email was this, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I can pull it up, but I think it was people that were term limited would serve one more term.
Right. Right. But that was before, that was on Thursday, so.
And I think that's the position I think that I would take. But we need to have some, it's a difficult problem. There's pros and cons to all this. There's not right or wrong answers, and basically we're just trying to do what makes sense for the town in general. And but that being the case, we need to have some, if not a consensus, a majority opinion about this.
right, so the two options are again?
That people would serve, people that would potentially be term limited would serve one additional term,
That's one option, and the other one?
is that they wouldn't serve anymore. They'd all be staggered, but if you were term limited, you'd be you could potentially be appointed. But we have to all understand that nothing's automatic. It's not like you get appointed, then you're golden for 6 years, right? You have to actively be reappointed. And if it didn't make sense to, I'm not going to be here probably for most of these reappointments. I suspect several of us won't be either, so it would be the board at the time who would decide whether or not those people are going to be appointed at that time. So,
And the net effect of the second approach is that those people who have already served 8 to 10 to 11 years would have a minimum of 4 extra years in office. So that
I
would
suspect
put
we
in-
could set it up where
Yeah.
they would have 3
even
just by through.
it's still 12 to 15 years total, or 10 to 14 years, 11 to 14 years total. And to me, that is, I highly regard people who've served on committees. God knows I've done it myself. I'm on a committee I've served heaven knows how many years. So I respect longevity and I respect experience. But I do believe we have a full community of 12,500 people, all of which have the right to be able to serve. And so I am, where I stand. I would like to see us be true to the spirit of this 6-year term limit and 6-year term of service composed of 2 3-year terms, and thereby not automatically give the longest-serving members that additional 3 years.
Okay, I think that's fair. In terms of trying to solve this tonight, we're not going to necessarily solve it, since we'll have to approve this at a board meeting. So I think my recommendations to staff would be, here are the 2 options. Please vote on it.
I'd actually, is there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to get public comment about it, but that's just in terms of how staff should approach it. I think that might make the most sense, just for ease on them.
So for April 9th, you would like us to bring forward 2 sets of resolutions, one with both options discussed tonight?
I don't know if you need to bring you could bring the resolution, depending on how hard it is. I'd like the cafeteria option where the board could then say, yeah, I want the apple pie, but not without the a la mode. I want the 1 additional term, or I don't want to. It can't be that hard. So,
Right.
so I would have them available for that meeting.
Okay.
Andrew, I had actually a slightly different option.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
kind of in between the 2 of them.
Yeah.
And I had the longest-serving people, the longest-serving 3 of each advisory committee would serve an additional 2 years. That's it, starting June. There'd be no additional 3 years after that. They would serve 2 years. The second tier would serve 4 years. And then the third tier, which would be most of the new people, would serve 6 years total.
I think that's very reasonable.
And if you do the math on most of these, it doesn't solve Sandy's issues, but for the middle tier and the third tier, the math works out really well. So if you look at someone like Daryl McCool, who came on in April of 2010, she'd be a tier 2. She'd serve 4 more years, so that would put her at 6 years. It gets kind of, I guess, contentious when you look at some of the longest-serving people. But I still think we could break it up and we could be equitable to everybody by having 2, 4, and 6. That forces the stagger. Then when you have the vacancies, then we might have to fudge the vacancies a bit and force them to be 2-year terms, the first one, or whatever it might be. But I think for most of them, 2, 4, and 6 works. And so I would encourage you to come up with a third and look at it. You guys do the math, and if it doesn't make sense to you, then we can scrap it. But to me, it makes sense.
Right, and I think that's certainly also a very reasonable approach.
So why didn't you choose 2 years, 3 years, and then 6?
Because you have 1 year difference between 2 and 3, then you have 3 years difference between 3 and 6. To me, it's just a kind of a natural stagger. There are 2 years in between. And then you can take the other years in between and adjust them accordingly for the vacancies. But this I think things could change if somebody is in the middle of their 3-year term and they decide to leave, then somebody comes in, then you've got,
And assuredly, things like that are going to happen,
Yeah.
so.
So your option would or would not require us to go back and amend the resolution that we already passed? Would it or wouldn't
resolution or
it?
the ordinance?
The ordinance, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It would.
All
Okay.
of
So-
these would,
All of these options would, yes.
Every single option.
unless you're available for 2 additional terms.
Unless unless what we're doing is saying term limits basically start the moment everyone is reappointed and partial terms don't start.
Right. Anything short of that requires an amendment.
Right.
Okay, so we could, how hard would that be for you to have those 3 options available? I don't want to cause undue work for the staff, but,
We will, the language is easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The language is easy. It's the chart. We'll go through the chart, and we'll have 3 different charts for the
great.
board to look at.
Okay, does that sound a fair approach for tonight? And I want to clear up, do we want all the committees to have their term end in June, or do you want to stagger the appointments of the committee so that you don't have to do, 20 different appointments? Or actually a third of them, so 7 appointments in April?
For staff, as far as keeping track, it's easier just to do them all in June, but
Okay.
that's additional work for the board.
It's a lot of work for the board, just so
Yeah,
that we
we
know
gotta
that what
interview.
we're
I think
doing
it's
to
fine,
ourselves.
actually. Let's just keep it uniform.
Okay, so if you have a few, if there's 7 people up,
So, yeah,
then you have
April
3
will have a
people
little bit
for
more
each,
work,
so there's
so.
20 people you're appointing, just so that people are clear, or 20 people you're interviewing, I should say. Okay.
I see your point, yeah.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
if it's easier for you guys, we'll just do.
So when we advertise twice a year, that's January and July? Or are we now October and,
March, I think.
and
is what's in the
March?
ordinance.
all right, well, that makes sense then. June's good.
Hey,
Okay.
Matt, do you know how many people we currently have waiting to be on an advisory committee that weren't successful before?
No, we'd have to go back, and I don't remember who's still interested and who no longer is. We'd have to contact those individuals we've interviewed recently and see.
My guess is it's not a gigantic number.
Not huge, but I'm led to believe that there's a few.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, Ilya?
Will we have time to hear from
Yeah, yeah.
members? Because I know our time is running short, and if everybody wants to speak, it'd be nice to.
Yes, and then we need to talk about the other aspects of this, so we're not going to be solving this at the next meeting, so we'll need to have another work session regarding the resolutions if we want to talk about that.
Well, John, go ahead.
Yep, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We're informal during the work session, Bart.
John Nyberger, 1514 Waldona Way. Let's see, I guess, to be frank, I do feel like I'm getting pushed off. I've put a lot into this town in both of these committees. I understand the logic behind it, sort of as a looking outside in. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's the right thing to do. But me as an individual, well, I won't be here anymore. I liked Chris's suggestion of the 2, 4, and 6. It provides a little bit more space so that people can move off at their own leisure, so to speak, as they come to understand that the way that their involvement had been going would change going into the future. So I thought that was a good suggestion. And I wanted to just make a comment on the idea of I sort of heard this a bunch of time in different ways, is that people who serve for a long time, it's like some type of detriment. And I think it's very interesting. It just, for me personally, I started in 2003, and in 2009, I would be off the committee. It would have been a great run. We got a lot of places We got a lot of land preserved. We did some great partnering with various properties for purchase. We got the summer report done. It's amazing stuff. But in 2010, I was appointed to POSAC, and later, that next year, the Hutchinson-Harris Reservoir came up. I was sitting on POSAC. I call up Ron, say, "Hey, Ron, how's it going? Let's talk about this." I don't know. That wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had the. Been seen by the county commissioners to be appointed to that. It's a very difficult committee to get on, as I'm sure you've probably heard. So something like that is something that's going to be a consequence of this, I think, going forward, having the 6-year, that sort of 6-year limit. And again, I completely understand. POSAC, for instance, with the county, is not. There's nothing written on it. It's up to the commissioners what to do. But they don't appoint anyone for more than 3-year terms, 9 years. It could be 6. It could be whatever the number. But they decide. They decide whether or not that person should be on or not anymore. So anyway, just wanted to share my personal aspects to that, and also just I think how that could be a detriment in open space or in other committees too, where getting on them at a county level is challenging, and getting that level of being seen is somewhat hard to do. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Gladys 4444 South 3rd Avenue. I have served on ProStack Committee. I've served at the county level on other committees. And I'm going to tell you that there are a lot of residents that are really ticked about the issue of these people that have been on these committees for years. Now, I understand there's openings on various ones. If they wanted to apply, they could have applied. However, if there's term limits on your positions, then there needs to be the term limits on the committees also. When these committees were originally organized, Bruce set it up 2 years limits. That was it. You had to be on. You could be on for 2 years, then you had to be off. And I'm sorry to see that didn't stick, because that would have eliminated a lot of the long-term people that's been on there now. I'm not saying that these long-term people have not done a good job, and I'm not saying that these people haven't put a lot of energy into it. But you need to do something about ending these long-term people.
Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle. I've communicated with most of you, and I think my positions are fairly well known, so I'll be brief. I am a strong supporter of term limits. I've been working on the two committees for between 4 and 5 years, and my experience has been that that this is very healthy for the town and for the board. We are advisors to you. Experience is valuable, but this doesn't. This by no means eliminates people with experience and a history from contributing in many ways before this board. And anybody, of course, can come back on, and there are provisions where they can come back on if there were not any other candidates to fill any openings. So I think you've covered in your ordinances all of those circumstances. So I'm most concerned that having passed term limits in the ordinance 2 weeks ago, after 6 months of debate with many meetings, this board has spent more time on this than I think almost any other single issue, when you consider that most of you attended the liaisons and chair meetings and other sessions in this room. So I'm concerned that we do that and then lengthen these terms during the transition, so that we then do not have anything to go forward to the public with. We do not have, we start advertising in our outreach twice a year with no real openings for them. So I think the board will be best served, and the town will be best served to open this up and open this up as soon as possible and not wait. So I'd like to see the shorter end of the spectrum, but I think within 3 years we can have a very orderly transition of members and allow new people to come in. And let me point out, at that point, within a year, you'll have people being able to come back on again. So there's plenty of opportunity for experience. And I just want to close by my remarks by mentioning that of everybody on this list, if you take let's say, Trustee Pennington's proposal, I'm probably the one that's most adversely affected if you do the math. So some people can feel they're targeted, but the truth of the matter is I think this is fair for everybody, and the sooner we move on with this, I think the better for the ability of the committees to serve you. Thank you.
I think Chris's proposal as far as the 2, 4, and 6 sounds really simple and straightforward. Did I say 6? Is it supposed to be?
2, 4, 6.
Yeah. I think that sounds simple and straightforward. Just by nature of the ordinance, we've already created vacancies. So, I mean, the recycling committee has had 2 vacancies previous, and now it's going to have 3. The Parks Committee has currently a vacancy that's had for some time, so it's going to have additional vacancies as well. The Open Space Committee will also have an additional vacancy. So just by nature of that, we've already created vacancies, additional vacancies on these committees. So I think just going straight forward and something very simple, not complicated, is something that I would be in favor of. And then I had a question as far as, is it the end of June or the beginning of June that you were thinking of changing the, or ending the terms? Because we'd had a discussion about that in one of the meetings about, because that's budget time. So it seems kind of hard to have new people jump right in. I mean, it's a great way for them to learn things, but it's also, you know, kind of hard from a committee standpoint to be working on the budget and have brand new members. So we had talked about July 1st at one point, and I was just wondering if that might be something that you would consider. So
the advisory committees meet once a month.
Yeah,
It's usually
and
the middle of the month.
June's staff starts in May on our budget,
Yeah.
which seems a little crazy, but we do.
that June.
And for the committees, I think, start thinking about the next year's budget in June. But the final budget usually isn't adopted to October, November, so there's time in there for, and that's the nice thing about the staggered, so hopefully you'll never have more than three new members.
I agree with the stagger part. I was just wondering if there were, we had talked at one point about through the end of June, the changeover. So I don't know if that's something you might consider. That's it.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else about this, about the terms and staggering and all that? Do we want to jump in for the 10 minutes to do this? Okay, so there's we can walk through each individual resolution if you want to do that. There might be maybe a bigger global question, which was a discussion about whether or not ProStack's mission and title should change to more centered on parks and recreation and have open space be their own and divide those. So I don't know if we want to have a conversation about that right now.
I would rather see us finalize the resolutions as they are and then have that discussion at a later time to get some really good input from both advisory committees, because the thing that I struggle with is the term open space and where that really falls. And I think that it's a much deeper discussion than just in these work sessions. So I think it's something we should put off till later, much later, and not part of this.
It also might be helpful to go through the definitions of open space. I think we have 4 of them or something, and maybe put the particular open spaces into those groups. The developed open space might not be an OSAC issue, and the riparian corridor might be more of an OSAC issue. So might be one way of addressing that aspect.
I would really not like to adopt resolutions and then revisit it later. that to me is completely, we've done this way too long, embarrassingly long, and we really need to do it once and be done, and do it in an integrated way. And if we're making changes to the responsibilities or whatever, then that's what people need to know they're being appointed for. I just really wouldn't want to delay to say that we were going to do something, make other changes to these resolutions right when we're passing them. And is that,
I see an interested member of the public who would like to say something.
Margaret Parrish, long-suffering member of the OSAC committee. I would just like to give you a little context of why the OSAC committee recommended this change in the titling. And that was because, and some of you may know the history of why there are two committees with open space in the title, but it does kind of lend to some confusion in the different the public that comes to our meetings to talk about one thing or the other. So I think distinguishing, as you say, between Parks and Rec being involved in developed open space and the OSAC committee being involved in natural open space, I think would be really helpful for not only the board, but the committees themselves as to what their scope is, the public that comes to talk to us, what they're, going to the right committee to talk. So it was really just to sort of try and clarify the roles, responsibilities of the two committees for everybody's sake.
I think to clarify, I think the question of overlap needs to be addressed now. And I think there's too much overlap, and I really thought that the proposal that you all made was very rational and made sense.
Yeah, it's exactly that, to try and say we don't really need that overlap. It just creates confusion.
Only been a mess.
Tension.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jim Payne, ProStack, I disagree, and we're obviously not going to discuss this now, but I just want to go on record that I strenuously disagree. No problem with further definition, but I think that I'm a little disturbed, and some of our membership is a little disturbed, and I want to point out that ProStack has not had the opportunity to meet on this, so there are really just a few of us who are sort of aware of what's going on.
Just can I clarify? So the concern is, I'm not sure what.
The concern is that OSAC is meeting to define ProStack, and it's a little bit, I think a little bit out of order. We'd be happy to meet and tell you what we think is important to ProStack, and they can do the same for OSAC, and then the board can decide. But I don't think it's helpful.
Conceptually, though, how do you feel about in terms of not just the process, but conceptually, how do you feel about that?
Conceptually, as some of you know, I started this conversation with the then chair of OSAC. When was it? 4 months ago, we met with Matt. So there's a lot in here that I'm certainly open to, and I can't speak for ProStack because we haven't met on it. But I think we need to have a chance to meet, and I think this is going to proceed better if we just let each committee tell you what they think is important for themselves and not spend their time defining the other committee.
Okay.
Hi, Brent Bickerly, 62 El Dorado Drive. I'm on the ProStack. I'm a rookie. I'm new. So this is obviously a new issue for me. I was excited at my first meeting when we came in and we were going to talk about naming 3 parks, and we were going to talk about the exciting additions we're making to Town 9 Park. And then, of course, this issue came up, the very first thing. And I've thought about it, and conceptually, when I go for a walk with my kids or my dog, I don't think, well, geez, do I want to go to the park, or do I want to use the trails, or do I want to go to the open space? We, as far as I see it, are here to serve you and look at the comprehensive resources we have available to provide the best experience for all of our residents. There are certain areas where you're mixing together natural open space with Parks and Rec. The Frisbee Golf Center, I would say, is an example of that. Where are we supposed to now say, oh, well, we can't handle this part we can only handle 2 parks, and the third park's over here. Obviously, we're just advisory committees. We shouldn't. we shouldn't do anything. I didn't elect any of you to, you guys are responsible for making the decisions. You know, we're not elected, so we want to provide you with the best advice we can and not have our hands tied, I don't think, by saying, oh, well, is this a riparian corridor, or is this a wetland, so we can't put a trail through it, or what's developed. Obviously, you're going to listen to OSAC, and if they have objections to what we're doing, or there's problems within their charter, you know, you need to listen to everybody. So I don't see why we should make ProStack into PRAC. Thank you.
I know our time is almost up, but I agree with Lisa that we need to make this decision ahead of time, number one. I think that the fair thing to do is, we've heard from OSAC, it's time for you guys to meet and give us your feedback, so we have that both in front of us, and then discuss it as a board, and then make a decision. I don't want to push it off, you know, months in the future. So, Jim, would you be able to let us know if you're going to discuss this at your next meeting, and then send us something after that? Okay.
So we need to decide whether or not we're going to do this stagger part or independently of discussing the other parts of the resolution, or whether or not to put them all together.
I think we can do the staggered, you know, at their next meeting, and do the resolutions after we've had the discussion about this overlap between ProStack and OSAC. They don't have to be tied together.
I agree.
No, it's,
So just clarification on that. You want a separate work session for each of those issues? Or we could do it during a regular meeting if we have time too, but,
I think we need a work session on the other parts of the defining resolutions.
okay.
So, but if we don't do the stagger or reappointments, I mean, if people are going on record, I completely disagree with everything we're doing here, but just trying to be a team player and getting this thing taken care of. That if we don't do the appointments and the staggers soon, we will go past the deadline of people, and we still have to do interviews. So, if we don't do that sooner than later, we're going to run into a problem.
I thought that's coming up at the April 9th meeting, though.
That's what he's asking.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, that was for the hopes of adopting the resolutions, but we'll need more discussion before we get to that point. So it'll be in the second meeting in April, it looks like now.
Okay.
For the stagger, you think
Why
it
would
would
we
take
need more
2
discussion,
meetings?
though?
Why can't we do the stagger separately
Yeah.
and actually be prepared to vote as a board
Right.
on it next meeting?
Exactly.
And adopt the resolutions with the stagger language in it?
Well, we may have to separate the two out.
Maybe
Yeah.
just have separate resolutions regarding the reappointments. We might have, it's not very clean, but otherwise I don't see any way that we're going to be able to
We can vote on April
notice-
9th on the staggered
Just the stagger aspect.
as a resolution.
because we still have to notice for openings, we have to do the interviews,
Yeah.
then do reappointments, and I'm worried that we're then going to push ourselves to
We'll get together and see how we can make that work.
Okay.
So the proposal is just to vote on the stagger, not the resolutions with the stagger?
That's what I'm a little
That's
confused
what I'm
about.
Yeah.
Yes, there'd be a resolution about the reappointments.
Right.
What, okay.
I mean, we could,
Separate
we
from
don't see the
these
purpose, what the
resolutions?
purpose would be. Separate from these resolutions, unless,
mean,
otherwise
'cause
we'll have
we're-
to have work, otherwise we're, second meeting in April, then we have decided what we want to do, then we're going to go out and notice that we need to appoint people, please come in for the interview. I just have a hard time seeing how that's going to
I don't
be
see how,
able to be
if we
done by
vote on the stagger,
June
then
1st.
what difference that would make if we don't have final resolutions in place? Would it make a difference?
I mean, I think we need to vote on the resolution as a whole, if that's what we're looking to vote on. I'm just unsure as to, I mean, I guess we could just do a quick show of hands on who supports which stagger, and then we can come back and I can do the resolution, we can bring the
Yeah.
resolutions back.
Yeah.
If that is easier.
The next time.
So we'll do that at the next
I don't think there's
regular
any way
meeting.
we're going to be able to vote
Yeah.
on and finalize these resolutions April 9th, because we want to talk about the responsibilities between OSAC and ProStack.
I think we're all agreed on that, Chris. It's whether or not we can break out the stagger
So
as
we
a
will-
separate topic.
We will plan on having for the April 9th regular meeting a decision item on the staggered.
Right.
It's not not
Correct.
included as the resolution, just
That's
that
fine.
point.
Yes.
Where the board will vote, and then we'll incorporate that in the final
Correct.
resolution.
Correct.
That's the, right.
And so how are we handling the committees as far as OSAC and PROSTAC and how that has changed and broke out?
They'll meet and come back at a work session.
Right, yeah.
After their.
So we're doing that after we approve the resolutions?
No.
After we approve
No.
the
Stagger
Okay.
part.
Okay.
And can we have a work session, the PROSTAC, OSAC on the 9th? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'll take a look. I'll take a look.
Sooner than later, it's helpful.
Yeah.
I
I mean, ideally, if PROSTAC meets between now and April 9th, which I assume they are going to meet, then we should try and do that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we are obviously over time, so we'll take a, it's good discussion, so we'll take a 2-minute break, and then we'll start the meeting at 5 after. That's the thing. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a Town of Superior Board of Trustees and a Superior Metropolitan District Number 1 Board of Directors for March 12, 2012. And Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Muckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Evie Gregoris,
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skumatz.
Here.
Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here?
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Phil Sarton here.
Very good. That brings us to item number 3, approval of the agenda. I have just one question before we do the approval. So in the renewal of the liquor license for Conoco, at least in my packet, the sheriff's recommendation was blank. Is that? But you said it was recommended. I just wanted to make sure that I was not missing something or.
The sheriff's office did recommend approval.
Okay.
And then I'll have to double
Yeah,
check.
he didn't circle one or the other. But
Okay.
He signed it, so I assumed that meant he.
Okay. I just wanted to be certain that.
I can check with him and make sure.
No, I feel
No,
comfortable if that's.
signed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure. All right. With that, any changes to tonight's agenda? Trustee Williams and Trustee
Yeah.
Pennington?
7H I'd like to pull.
I'd like to pull 7E.
I'm sorry, 7E.
E? E. E.
So
7E.
7E and 7H will follow the consent agenda. Any other changes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion with those changes by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Gregorius. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. That brings to item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. Trustee Hanson, would you like to start? Or?
Sure. Attended a meeting with Paul Shepard at Brixmore with Matt, Beth, and Sandy, and it was the first time I got to meet with him and get to know him, but it was very informative. Got to learn more about some of the possible future tenets of the marketplace and some of the ones that we can't approach because of restrictions for Target. But moving forward, I feel good that they're open to working with us to make sure the marketplace gets filled. I attended a chamber ambassador meeting and business after hours at Stafford Team Realty, and wow, it was just a super good time. It's been a while since I've been to one. It was just really fun. A lot of good people, good businesses there. Took a tour of the waste treatment plant, the water treatment plant, and Mr. Rainey, is that his name?
Yeah.
Manages.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of energy, and it appears that he's got the town's best interests at heart when he manages those locations. He's always looking for ways to save on the budget and improve our services. So very happy with him. I attended a Boulder Valley Superintendent Budget Advisory Committee meeting and got a little bit more information on Senate Bill 191 and the impact on the budget. And I'd be happy to discuss with any of the board members about that because it's a little in-depth. But there really could be a serious budget impact when that gets implemented on the amount of money that would be spent with evaluating teachers. Right, currently they required to evaluate teachers once every 3 years. That's the minimum. With 191, they'd have to evaluate them every year. And depending on what level the teacher's at would require additional assistance, so it could mean more bodies that they'd have to hire. So it could be huge negative impact. Let's see. Oh, we confirmed some dates on overflow parking for Indiana, so I submitted those dates today. Starting on the 22nd of this month, we have a group of volunteer parents from SES, Superior Elementary School, that will be covering up the signs.
Well, and just I'm checking with Martin, but it's better if town staff does
Yes.
that rather
Oh.
than residents. So that's what will happen there.
That's great. We were under the
Yeah.
impression that it would have to be done by volunteers from the school.
Yeah.
No, I think in
that's-
public right away, it's better to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
the sheriff or
Makes
town
it
Sorry,
staff.
I was going to
easier.
send you an email.
Oh, I was out
Just
trying to
didn't get
find
it.
good covers for the signs and all that
no,
stuff,
we'll
so that's
have to
great.
do that
Okay.
kind of stuff, yeah.
And then lastly, I have a meeting tomorrow with a representative from SCORE, which is a Small Business Administration arm, and we're going to be meeting with Mike Akins, the Chamber President, and Brad Hughes, the Chamber VP, to discuss ways that we can bring SCORE into town and help some of the businesses that are currently here on business plan building and using QuickBooks and all that kind of stuff. So looking forward to that meeting. And that's it.
Great, thanks. Trustee Skumatz?
Attended an RCAC meeting where we discussed the committee organization. That's it.
Great. Let's see. Town staff hosted a meeting for traffic issues in the Sagamore area, so I appreciate that. It was didn't have huge turnout, but I think it was helpful. Attended the same tour at the wastewater treatment plant, and it was informative and very it's great to hear from the contractor and town staff there. It was really helpful. Just in terms of what's happening at RTD these days, so I think most people have heard that we had talked about options 1, 2, and 3, which when RTD announced which one of those 3 they'd pick, they said, well, none of those, and we'll pick option 4. With option 4 being building the train to the from Denver Union Station to the Church Ranch and implementing all of bus rapid transit. The Church Ranch, I think, was going to be completed in 2022 and BRT by 2020, if I remember those dates, or something like that. But that not having anybody having the ability to actually go over any of that and just announcing that to the public, I think, caused a lot of consternation. So US 36 mayors and commissioners letter that will be sent to RTD, or maybe it's already been sent to RTD, is that we can't possibly weigh in on that, and we need more time. So we'll see what RTD Board of Directors does later this month. And I think that's it. Trustee Williams.
I attended that same, well, you didn't attend that meeting, but I went to the RTD meeting downtown last week when they pretty much dropped a bomb on everyone with option 4 instead of option 1, 2, and 3. And they called it the hybrid option, kind of combining all 3 options, or at least 1 and 2. And they have a committee that's meeting on March 20th. And I believe there's no public comment at that, although we can attend it and see what they recommend to RTD for whether it's option 1, 2, or 3, or option 4, which is obviously their preferred option, at least their staff. And then March 27th, the board, the RTD board, will be making their vote on whatever their whatever option it is, whether they go with staff or they do something completely different. But I would anticipate that they would be going with option 4, since that is their staff recommendation. But you never know. They all seem pretty gung-ho on option 4. And I believe we're going to be having a public meeting, is that correct? For that will send out an e-blast for everyone to be able to come to this public hearing and hear from the Assistant General Manager from RTD.
At a special meeting of the board on March 19th, which is next Monday at 6 p.m. And Rick Clark, who's the RTD Assistant General Manager of Capital Programs, will be present, along with Chris Quinn, who's the RTD Program Manager and has specific knowledge on the Northwest Rail Line. Will be in attendance as well.
And so when are we sending out that e-blast?
We'll send it out later this week, Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay. So that will be our opportunity to hear what RTD has to say about the option 4, or all of the options, and provide public comment, definitely, for sure. So I'm hoping that we can generate a lot of the public on March 19th. Also, I attended a special Open Space Advisory Committee meeting, and I wanted to make sure that the board received Open Space Advisory Committee's resolution with their changes, and that we can, that everyone is able to look over those changes and be able to talk about them at our next meeting. So just in case you didn't get it, let me know. I can send it on again. I also attended a Louisville Library meeting with Sandy, Trustee Pennington, and the library, they talked about a strategic planning and visioning for the library. They call it kind of a inspire, involve, share, and connect kind of philosophy, and create just important aspects of the library and what how they see the future. So they'll the last strategic plan was 2008, so they're due time for that. And then I also attended a tour of the wastewater treatment plant and the water treatment plant, and that was quite the eye-opener, and was very interesting. And now that we can sit and talk about some of the aspects that are highly technical, I'll at least have seen it in person and understand what is going to be replaced in the future. And that concludes my reports.
Trustee Gerberos.
I think we all attended a dinner with the Planning Commission. Has that
Yeah.
been within the last couple of weeks?
Everybody but myself, so my apologies that I was unable to get it.
I knew I was here like sooner than 2 weeks ago, so that was very, very pleasant. We had a lot of robust discussions about many things, and all looking forward to the comp plan. I think that's going to have a lot of work ahead of us. And Trustee Pennington and Williams and I just had a Safety and Transportation Committee meeting, specifically talking about the McCaslin pedestrian crossing. Alex did a great job with the presentation. We had 3 different options. The first one was mid-block flashing lights by High Plains, so that people on the ridge can make a left-hand turn. Costs between $150,000 and $200,000, which was the least costly of the options, but the least favorable for all 3 of us. So to the board, the potential safety to pedestrians with flashing lights on McCaslin, especially going southbound, is just too great. So we kind of eliminated that option. Second option was an underpass, the safest by far and the most costly. Sit between $1 and $1.2 million. So that's, if the money existed, if we had monopoly money, I think we would all vote for that right now. But trying to be fiscally responsible, I don't think that's it's a good option, but I don't think that's going to happen. So then we have the third option, which was a traffic signal at a High Plains, reasonable cost, $200,000 to $300,000, that would accommodate both the cars leaving the ridge and pedestrians as well. And there is also a connection to the trail on the west end of Rock Creek, so that would help people if they wanted to go down to the schools as well. And Trustee Williams, do you want to share the addendum to that option?
So I felt that when you're coming out of the ridge, there were 2 issues. One, as a driver, you can't make a left because it takes, the traffic on both sides that you're trying to make that left. So a left turn is very difficult. And as a pedestrian, a right turn is very difficult because you're walking on McCaslin, just completely open to the traffic. So that's a very huge safety hazard, in my opinion. When I was at that intersection, I didn't even want to make that right as a pedestrian. So I felt that we needed to come up with an option that was going to solve both those issues for car traffic, automobile traffic, and pedestrian traffic. So choosing option 3, which was the pedestrian and car traffic signal that is activated when there's a car there and activated when a pedestrian pushes the button. And then also that there's a trail connection that you would then be able to, as a pedestrian, go straight across. And then there's a trail connection that I was asking for that was not in the option 3, which would allow you to make a right, and you can connect to the Meadowlark trail system that's on the west side of McCaslin. So we're going to look at some options, whether we use a portion of McCaslin for a pedestrian-friendly and safe option for walking, or whether we create a completely different trail that goes from the ridge straight to the Meadowlark, a Crusher Fine or something like that.
So when you're going south on McCaslin, if you leave the ridge, there's an acceleration lane that goes, that will not be needed anymore, I guess, if you have a light. And potentially we can use the asphalt that's already there to become part of the connection to the trail. And is Martin here? No, he's not.
So,
do you want to say something, that you've contacted the county to talk about that little connection? That would help. This will all make sense in a second.
I don't know. Good evening, Martin Toth, town staff. So we've had a chance, town staff's had a chance to reach out to staff members at Boulder County Parks and Open Space to inquire whether or not they would consider allowing an informal connection, one that's would be pedestrian and bike friendly, but not a trailhead that would have parking. So if you remember what Colton and McCaslin used to look like before there was a trailhead there was an informal connection there that wasn't recognized as a trail access point, but it functioned as one, just without parking. So we're in we've entered the process to have that request looked at by the county.
And if we were to use the acceleration lane in this, making the pedestrian, it gets very, very close to that gate to Meadowlark. So,
And that's just one option
Right.
that we will definitely want to look at as a board of how to connect pedestrians from the ridge to the Meadowlark trail system. So,
Okay. Anything else? Trustee Pennington?
Easy being on the end, I was at all these meetings except for the water treatment plant, have nothing more in that aspect to add. I wanted to ask the town manager, we spoke at the last meeting about waste connections accommodating the request for smaller recycling and trash bins, and how were we going to inform customers that they could make that?
Yeah, we had a
one-time
meeting
request?
with them last week, and the language that we included in the ordinance that they were okay with was that residents would be able to swap out to a smaller, change the size of their cart, no more than twice a year. We thought that was reasonable, and they were comfortable with that. So that's in the ordinance, and then they will be we'll be sending out this month a letter to the residents letting them know of the changes, and then a calendar as well.
Great.
When the recycle pickup is.
And could we include that in the newsletter as well, that information?
The newsletter's gone out, but we
April?
could do April.
Yeah, great. And then I was unclear after we met with the Planning Commission whether or not we're going to be sending your proposal for a PD at Town Center to the Planning Commission before it comes to the board for a vote or not.
No, I was not planning on it.
Okay. Is there, I don't know, is there any merit to getting the Planning Commission opinion on whether or not to spend the $300,000 to $400,000 across the street?
I think it'd be helpful to have the board take a first crack at it and then have it go to the Planning Commission, just so
Okay.
that we're on the same page.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I can't believe nobody else mentioned this, but go Buffs! Pac-12 champions.
Playing Las Vegas.
Okay. Town manager?
Yes, thank you. Let's see, I already mentioned the special meeting on the 19th. The interchange committee, we were trying to schedule something this next week, but we just couldn't make it work between the parties over in Louisville and us. So it looks like the first week in April is, we're going to try to shoot for that.
Oh, so it's not going to happen on the 19th? No?
So we'll send an email out on the first week in April. The Rocky Mountain Fire District, they're having an open house for Station Number 5, which is at Indiana and Colton, on March 31st from 1 to 4 p.m. So we'll get information out to the residents with regard to that open house. There's a new, the RTD changed up their districts and who represents the town. So John Taylor now represents Boulder County, including the town of Superior. So we will update. I think we have contact information on the website, which we'll update it.
has he been invited for the March 19th meeting?
I'm not sure, but we will make sure and invite him. Let's see. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but we scheduled the Boulder County Commissioners Candidates Forum for Town Hall here on May 8th, and we'll get information out to the public with regard to that. It'll be here in the boardroom. League of Women Voters will be posting that for us. We've scheduled the moving signs issue for the Planning Commission on March 20th for that meeting date. And I think that was most of my report.
Okay.
I have one
Trustee
quick question
Gervais,
for
yes.
Matt. Yeah, do you know, or maybe Alex know, was there something wrong with a left-hand turn light onto the freeway off McCaslin yesterday?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I've heard.
Because there were about 25, 27 cars. It took them about 8 minutes to turn left.
Was it during rush hour?
No, it was Sunday at 10:45. There was nobody else there. You got like 2, 3 cars turn left, you went red. You know, you kept waiting and waiting. So finally, you had to drive. Well, I'm not going to say, but we drove to Louisville, made a U-turn, and got on the freeway. Yeah. So
We'll
that
check
seems,
on it, yeah.
but like 10. I want to say 10 between 10:45 and 11 a.m. So really, on
Okay.
Sunday, there's no traffic. If it turns green, all the cars should be able to turn left to get on the freeway. So it's never happened before. So I'm just kind of curious.
We'll check on that.
Okay.
Matt, are we able to fix that light at Indiana and El Dorado, the flashing school children present light?
We had WL out, and they fixed that, and then we're out to check something else as well. So I just had them check everything in the area. So.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Town Attorney?
I just want to let you know, I think I had sent you all an update on the Randall litigation, but right now we're looking at a trial date in probably November or December. We do not have a final date yet, but that's what we're looking at.
Thank you.
I'll let you know when we have a final.
Great. Town Clerk? And actually, Matt, I do have a question that I meant to ask you. So there was a slightly cryptic note about the Winding Gap firming project and concerns that were being raised. And are you able to speak to that anymore? Like, what's the
No,
concern?
I don't know if Martin has. So, our Paul Zilas, he's our attorney for the Water District. We had gone through the whole process for the EIS, and then the assistant secretary for the EPA brought up some new concerns, and I emailed Paul today to find out what those were again. He told me, and I deleted the email, but I'll forward those to the board. But he thinks he's hoping they'll be quickly resolved, and that we'll be able to move forward with the project. So he doesn't seem to be too overly concerned.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. With that brings us to item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items.
Gladys 4404 Southwood Avenue. Saturday afternoon, our state senator will be at El Dorado School holding a town hall meeting regarding health issues.
Superior Elementary.
It is Superior? Okay, sorry.
Thank
But
you.
anyway, Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle. I was wondering if it would be possible on the Traffic and Safety Committee to publish the agenda. That's a pretty big topic today, and something I've been trying to follow. I really didn't know was on the agenda.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome, George. We missed you at the last meeting, so I'm glad that you're here.
Superior, I have a question pertaining to the green ordinance, number H. Talk about it now.
H is going to come after the
Coming up.
consent agenda, so.
It got pulled.
It
I
got
pulled
pulled,
it.
and then,
I pulled it.
And just for the record, I think we did notice the Traffic and Safety Committee meeting, but not separately. It was part of the work session agenda.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
published the
without a
time
topic.
and the day, but we didn't
Yeah.
publish the agenda, so we'll
Right.
make sure we do that in the
Okay.
future.
Okay, very good. If there's no additional public comment, that brings us to item number 6, presentations, and we have 2 this evening. And it's my great pleasure to welcome the principal from Superior Elementary School. Welcome, and thank you for coming. Yeah, that would be great. Why don't you give them to Phyllis and she can hand them.
Thank you very much. I'm Jen Aikenoy, principal at Superior Elementary. And you have in front of you, and I have a few more, just our flyers that I put together for our elementary school for our presentation tonight that just highlights a few of the wonderful, I would say, acknowledgments that we have earned this year. When you open the front cover, you will notice that this year we received our 9th John Irwin Award of Excellence in our overall academic performance. So we still remain in the top 8% of schools here in the state of Colorado. We also were ranked number 2 in Boulder Valley schools, earning 99% out of a total of 100. There was only one other elementary school that beat us. We actually had 99.3, I think it was. We also, if you look at the new website that Colorado parents have put together, which is the Colorado School Grades, we are graded as an A+ school. We are 17 out of the 1,467 elementary and middle schools that are being compared there. We have a great active parent community, and so I see a couple of our parents here on the board tonight, which we greatly appreciate the support and help there at the school, as well as our staff that is always continuing to better themselves and improve in their own teaching and learning skills as well. Some of the goals that we're working on this year, looking at our data, that's part of what we do. It's called a Unified Improvement Plan that the state requires us to put together. The 2 goals that we're working on this year happen to be around improving our writing achievement and our growth scores for all of our students. And then we're also looking at establishing a common understanding of effective research-based teaching strategies for our staff, so professional development that we're putting forth there. We have a very active student council that is partnering with a couple different programs here. One that is called the Canine Partners of the Rockies, which helps to put animals, they use service dogs to help with disabled residents here in Colorado who are in need of assistance. And so we are helping to raise funds to support some of those animals and the training that goes into that, as well as we just became a partner with the 2 counties, Boulder and Broomfield, who have created a partnership with the Bumblee Hospice in Tanzania. And it's brand new to us this year, and again, it's a fundraiser, but it's to help the students that are impacted by parents who are in the hospice program there. We have discovered that the children are very highly impacted, and a couple of their folks came to visit our student council and shared with us what they're doing, and have just really embraced us and really want to make that connection with us because they see how the kids are so impacted by their parents being in hospice. And one of the questions that they asked was what was their favorite subject in school, and the kids in Tanzania say that it's English, learning English. So we hope to make those connections with those kids and support them in whatever way we possibly can, because we know that some of those kids can't go to school if they don't have their uniforms. And so we're raising funds to help support that and help the kids with school supplies and getting uniforms so that they can attend their schools. So those are a couple of the different programs that we have. This year is our first year of our early out. And I know several of the schools in Superior, we all have a different schedule. Ours is on Thursdays, so we have an early out on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. And that's been very, very beneficial for our staff to be able to come together as a team to look at their data, to review student work, to talk about best practices and interventions to help support kids in their learning as well as their own professional development. So that has been a new schedule for us. And so our schedule's on the back because it changes every day, and especially for our kinder kiddos. We still have half-day kinder, but it shifts just a little bit. So those are a few of the highlights that we're working on and have going on at Superior. And I just thank you for having me come tonight and present to you. And it's great to have the support, and all of the parents that we have and building those connections with the town. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you
Thank you
very
for
much.
coming.
Questions?
You're welcome. Any questions?
Just a quick comment. I don't know if you heard the town manager say that for our sign program, covering the signs, that town staff is actually going to take care of that. They're going to cover the signs on those special dates
Oh,
for
that's
overflow.
great.
Yeah, we'll have to cover those for you.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you very much.
I don't know if you want to provide any more information about what we're talking about as far as the need for additional parking.
And I can. Part of what we've run into is, unfortunately, because we have such a tremendous parental support that comes to school during the school day, we didn't plan very well when you think in terms of the parking facilities for us, and so we don't have enough parking space to accommodate all of the visitors to the school when we have special events, even for just one particular grade level. Because you figure each grade level probably has about 100 students, and so you look at all those parents that are trying to get in there and the parking space that it's needing. The overflow is tremendous, and it becomes a real concern and a real hazard for us. And I will be honest, we had to have some vehicles moved because they were blocking our fire lanes.
All right.
And it became a real safety issue for us, trying to get the fire trucks and any emergency responding vehicles into the parking lot in the event of an emergency, with all of the parents and families visiting the building at that time. So it was a real eye-opener for us.
Yep.
And so we want to make sure that we keep those lanes clear at the school at all times. And so we thought if maybe we could open up the parking on the street just for special events, that would help with that.
And we're talking a couple hours at a time.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Great.
And then, go ahead.
Nope, I just have a closing thing.
I didn't know if you wanted, if we wanted to discuss about snow removal at all, if you had any questions as far as...
You know, we've talked about that on the lower end, and I think it's more of if it's the city's responsibility, how far a city goes, how far does BBSD go to make sure that those sidewalks are clear. Part of what we do promote is walking or wheeling to school, and I know when the snow gets bad, it's hard. I have one custodian in the morning who shows up at 6 o'clock, and he's got to get a lot of these sidewalks cleared before the kids start arriving at 7:45.
So it's your school staff and not a district staff
We have
person
a
that comes out?
facilities that comes out,
Right.
but they will only touch what they can get to if they're driving in a truck. And some of those sidewalks are too narrow, and they can't get those trucks on those sidewalks.
So, and I know that that the town and district operations and the school will obviously work together.
Yeah,
we
and
don't
our
want
field staff's
to. We don't want to
Absolutely.
step on school operations, and they should do what they need to do. But obviously, we'll have extreme snow events from time to time that we'll need to pitch in. But I'm sure that we can do that on an as-needed basis.
That would be great. I appreciate the help.
Trustee Squires?
My question was the cone person and the crossing guard and I were wondering today, was it half-mast because of the tidal wave?
It was the
Tsunami?
Lieutenant Bear who passed, who was...
Right. The helicopter crash in
Yes.
Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I guess the only thing I want to say is that, it's really great to have schools like El Dorado K-8, Monarch High School, and Superior Elementary in the town of Superior. It's one of the things that helps make the town great. It's why a lot of us live here. It's, if you just look at, property values, people will want to live here because they can go to the school. So you should be very proud of your school, and it's very great that you came here, so thank you.
Absolutely, and we have a lot of families who do come in and say exactly that we moved here because of the schools. So thank you for the support. We appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the second presentation tonight, and that's from the Superior Chamber of Commerce.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Colon. I'm representing the Superior Chamber. I'm proud to serve as a Vice President of Events there. Our mission in the Superior Chamber is to promote and strengthen and support the economic vitality of our member businesses and the community of Superior. So it's a very dual purpose of obviously taking care of our businesses, but also taking care of our town. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things for you guys tonight. A couple of events. First of all, this Friday we have a Membership 101, Make Your Booth the Place to Be. Once a quarter we try to give a little bit of a membership tip to help our businesses promote themselves in the town. This one is all about our events, and so how do we make a great booth at our events that will be attractive to our residents so we can continue to promote those businesses. That event, again, will be Friday at noon at La Buena Vida, which is just across the street in Louisville. So make sure to check that one out. The other event that I wanted to make sure to highlight tonight is our next Business After Hours. Chris Hansen talked about the business hours this month at Stauffer Real Estate. This one's going to be at La Vie by the Safeway. They just moved locations, 5 to 7, April 12th. So that's coming up next month. We're also going to be doing a little bit of a ribbon cutting there for them since they just moved spots. And lastly, I wanted to highlight the new business directory and community guide. They do, actually, we do this every year. It's an incredible town resource. It's coming to mailboxes on Wednesday. So look for that. In here, you'll find all of our chamber businesses. You'll find a lot of really neat other town resources like phone numbers for the town, calendars, and my favorite, a little map of Superior in the middle so you can find everything that you need there. So be looking for that. Again, a great resource that our chamber promotes. This is also going to be live on our website, so you can actually go to the website and click on businesses and go straight to either the chamber site or their direct business to find more about them. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity to continue the communication and collaboration between these two organizations. It's amazing to work with you guys.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. Questions? Okay. Don't see any. Thank you very much for coming, and we obviously cherish our relationship with you, and I think it's going to be a relationship that will grow over time. So let's see. That brings us to item number 7, consent agenda. Remaining on tonight's consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the February 27th, 2012 Board of Trustees meeting, acceptance of the minutes of the committee minutes, which we don't have any this evening, approval of a liquor license renewal for the Conoco store, adoption of a resolution approving the 3-mile plan, adoption of a resolution for an agreement with Western Disposal for special event and waste disposal services, adoption of a resolution for an agreement with Parker Ag Services, Inc. for backwash pond cleaning services for Superior Metropolitan District Number 1, and adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with Design Concepts for the Town 9 Park Enhancement Project Design. With that, I'll entertain a motion. Trustee Gregora, second. Trustee Skumatz, discussion? Seeing none, Phyllis?
Williams?
Yes.
Dumas?
Yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Gregoris?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to what was E, adoption of a resolution for an agreement with Earth Green Fence Products, Inc. for fence painting and maintenance. Trustee Pennington.
Yes, the reason I pulled this actually is to, in light of all the fence damage we have had recently and always have when we have a windstorm, scope of services under 2 says fence painting, staining, and maintenance is completed on a 4-year rotation. So I just wanted to have made clear what is standard maintenance, what is storm-related maintenance, and how does that all tie together? Because we have a lot of fences right now that are looking pretty nasty. And I'm wondering how that all fits together.
Well, the maintenance is primarily just that, the painting of the fences in the areas that are described for that particular year. There might be some minor repair that they come across that they do. The response to the wind damage, storm damage type stuff is separate from this, and we get to that as quick as we can and get it repaired as quick as we can.
Okay, so
two separate
on the miles and miles and miles of fence we have in this town, particularly noticeable on my walks is the 1.5 or 2-inch slats, the privacy slats. They seem to have been, I assume, nailed in rather than screwed in, and they're off and broken in many instances. Is that, do we do that?
We do some, our staff does some of that, and then we we also have a third-party contractor that does some of it for us as well.
And I think I read, Martin, in something you put out that we're going to have our contractors screw those in rather than nail them in for the future. Yeah, that seems like a wise idea. Okay, and I did read in here that there is actually somebody responsible for monitoring the performance of this
That's correct.
contractor.
And they're responsible for submitting monthly reports as well on their progress.
Right. Okay, so I just wanted to tie that all together in terms of storm damage.
Okay.
That's my only reason.
You want to
Make a motion to
help
adopt.
us with the resolution?
I'm on the wrong page, but I bet you're not. You're not there? Okay, hold on here. Or somebody who's got it.
So trustee Pennington is looking for resolution R-20, Series 2012, a resolution of the Superior, of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with Green Earth Fence Products, Inc. for the fence painting and maintenance. I believe that's the one you were recommending.
Yeah, I move to approve it.
Okay. Second by trustee Gagaris. Discussion. Phyllis?
Gregoris?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Skumatz?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That brings us to what was H, preliminary reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 18 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding an amendment to the residential green building program. Trustee Williams.
So I pulled this because I was interested in finding out what other towns, neighboring towns, are doing about this as far as lowering the threshold from 50 to 45 or 40%, and have they even passed this?
And I'll have Ernie come up, but we are one of so Boulder County, City of Boulder have this type of program in place. I think the City of Longmont does as well. Beyond that, I don't think there's any other municipalities in the county that have
What's
residential green building program.
okay, and what do they have as their what percentage do they have for their efficiency threshold?
Ernie, so the question was, what other communities have a similar type program in place, and for those that do, what's their current threshold?
Ernie Kern, building official, Town of Superior. Only those 4 communities mentioned have a green building, residential green building code adopted at this time. The threshold, this was taken from, modeled after Boulder, City of Boulder. Our program was adopted in 2008. Hasn't been amended by us since then. I think these are still the numbers that the City of Boulder uses. Boulder County adopted one similar to what we're proposing, and that is starting at the HERS of 70 and then gradually going down to a HERS of, I think theirs only goes down to like 40. Ours actually continues on down to 25. In Longmont, I'm not sure. They have kind of a little bit different program, and I'm not sure what their threshold numbers are.
We'll have that for the second reading, that information.
And then also, if you can tell me how much more costly is it for these homes in order to meet this threshold?
I think that was in your attachment that you got from the builder of the Calmonte, Boulder Creek Builders, where they talked about increasing the threshold as you go up. It's a couple $1,000s to start with. It goes up to maybe $10,000 when you get to
The 45%.
the 45%, right?
So what are they recommending?
They were just looking for it to be scaled back a little bit for their homes.
Yeah, they're looking for us to scale back the requirement for homes under, basically under 3,500 square feet.
So, and I guess the other issue on this, or the other point of this is, these are arbitrary points where we chose to make the difference. And I think Boulder County kind of set a good example of making it a gradual change from we started a HERS of 70, which now matches the current International Energy Conservation Code. And then as you get, we wanted to start our improvement over that score at 2,500 square feet. We feel that's a sizable enough home where you can start making better design and improvements to it without increasing your cost on a percentage basis by very much at all. And even, you're talking about on a per unit basis, when you get up to 3,000, even 3,500, when we're talking of those areas, we're still not at a HERS requirement or increased improvements to the energy requirements by a sizable amount based on a percentage of the cost of the home. And as you get up there then to 4,000 and 5,000 square feet, where you're talking about custom-built homes, that are on the very high end, you're still, even though your percentages are probably going to stay about the same for increased costs, but it's the dollar-wise, it'll be an increased number, but still based on the cost of the home, still not a high percentage.
So with the proposed change that's included in the ordinance, it would effectively reduce the cost to builders as well as the energy efficiency requirement for those homes that reach 3,500 or less square feet, is what this change would do.
And that it's hasn't been used in Superior yet because they haven't had a new home built since it was adopted in 2008. So this is just a tweak that makes sense for building conditions at this time. The other thing is, for the especially for the Calmonte project, where the home's already designed and they can only do so much to get down to that score of 50 or 50% better than the 2006 code. That's where their cost was going to be $10,000 or more, and most of that was getting that last 5 to 10% increase
Per unit, right?
Right, per unit.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? When this comes back, can I have a brief primer on what HERS is, what ResNet is, what the percentages are that you're referencing? I think that I heard it was related to 2006, but I suspect I'm not the only one here that doesn't quite get all of that. So, and then maybe an example of the things that, it sounds like there were boiler changes and furnace changes. Can you just, when it comes back, can I have just an example of what those types of things that you're talking about? Trustee Skumatz.
And I'm not sure, but I don't think that this was necessarily corrected. We have, in the RCAC, when we looked at it, there seemed to be a disconnect between what the cover memo was saying and what the markup was and that sort of thing. So if you can assure me that that's been corrected, that would be great too. And then I think you said something like only 4 communities or something in the county, but what % of the buildings and population is that in the county? I think it's a pretty big percent, the 4 communities you're talking about.
That's correct.
So only 4 seemed
Well,
like
I don't mean to
modifier.
minimize that.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, that's correct.
It seemed like a very weird
I
modifier.
mean, if you look at Longmont, City of Boulder
Yeah.
County, and us,
Right. So.
I mean, those
But
3 that
Jamestown
we
didn't
mentioned
have it,
are
or Netherland didn't have it, Ward.
Erie, Louisville, Lafayette, Netherland, Lyons.
So that seemed a little strange to me, and I think it'd be great to have
Great. Let's see. So, Trustee Williams, do you want to move a preliminary reading?
All right. Actually, I'm going to ask one quick question.
Sure.
Can you also give us an idea of cost, what it's going to cost that builder, Boulder Creek Builders, if we pass this? How much more is that going to cost them to finish build out?
I mean, he said that in his public comment, but we'll put it in the cover.
Okay.
memo. Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, I would just like to know what kind of impact we are creating on what's left residential that we have already passed.
and if I can add on to that.
Sure, please
It'd
do.
be great to also have the other side of it. There's first cost, but there's ongoing cost.
Yeah, I mean, basically,
Well,
under,
in the past,
under our
that's through
current,
cost, yeah.
under the current program, it's $20,000 to $40,000 additional cost, and under the proposed, it'd be about $10,000. we'll include
Thank
that.
you.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to move to approve preliminary ordinance number 0 dash, no number, Series 2012, an ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior amending Section 18-14-40 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding energy efficiency requirements for residential buildings.
There's a motion and a second. There was some interest in public comment. I just want to make sure that
There
we're...
is.
George, I'm going to hold on the...
Motion?
I'll
Do you have a
I'll
second?
get with Ernie before it comes up for the public hearing and discuss
Okay.
the issues I have with him, and then I'll come back to public hearing.
Thank you for the clarification, Trustee Pennington.
Are we taking some discussion? Or
Yes, we can
okay.
discuss, sure.
I continue to be perplexed on first readings. When I read through this, I had 1,001 questions. I can't formulate an opinion on that. Is the purpose of a first reading to raise all those questions and get them answered on the second reading, or is it to be give a preliminary approval?
It's a combination. So if you have things that you want, things that you have questions about, or things you want staff to bring back for clarity, both of those can be done.
Which is
And
exactly what I asked for.
typically, from staff's perspective, on an item like this, there's got to be a public hearing at the second reading. So we'll put the first reading on the consent, knowing that we're going to have public comment and public hearing at the second one anyways. If it's an ordinance that can be placed on the consent at the approval, then we'll likely put that on for discussion during the first reading. Get those things hammered out, and then we can just put it on the consent for the second reading. That's how
Okay.
I usually proceed.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor? Not unanimous? Okay. So in favor is Hanson, Skomatz, Bucko, Williams.
With okay, well,
Just the first
all
reading,
right.
Yeah.
As long as we're having that information come back.
And Gregouris, and opposed is Pennington. Okay. That brings to item number 8, which is adoption and approval of a resolution approving an agreement with Clarion Associates to facilitate the 2012 Comprehensive Plan update. Mr. Magley?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me get to my information here. So I search for it. The town board identified as part of the budget process an update to the comprehensive plan to be done in 2012 and provided a budget as well to hire a company to help us with that process. We did, staff put out an RFP for consultants early in 2012. We received 11 proposals for that. We narrowed the field down to 4 and had interviews with those 4 companies and selected, based on the interviews and their proposals, Clarion Associates to help us with this year's 2012 Comprehensive Plan update. The Comprehensive Plan update has been done over the years, dating all the way back to 1996, with the latest being in 2006 was the last update we had. Typically, they're done every 5 years. We're at year 6, so we're kind of falling into that range now. Clarion Associates is a company out of Fort Collins, that's their headquarters in Colorado. They're a national company. They have teamed up with a number of firms to help us get through this process. Economic and Planning Systems will help them with their market analysis. Russell Mills Studio will help with the design and conceptual programming. Greenplay will help with kind of the facilitation services if we need them. And then for transportation, if needed, they'll use FHU, which is also the company that's helped us with the interchange, and they've done a lot of work in this area. So Clarion's proposal came in at $149,711. The budget for 2012 was $200,000. We will have some costs for town consultants, Foxfire Planning, LSC, Transportation, and Roscoe Engineering may have some costs to help us get through this process. And then a 5% contingency. So the total expected to spend this year for this process is $188,711. We expect the process to be a 6-month process, starting probably tomorrow, if the board approves the agreement, and wrapping up hopefully in October. Clarion is proposing 4 joint community meetings, which is, I think, a decent amount, and then 4 joint town board planning commission meetings, which is different than we've done in the past, but I think will work well, because get everybody in a room, discuss the issues, and get direction from the group rather than going to each one individually and getting kind of conflicting comments, so, and not being able to hash them out in one room. So we're looking forward to having that. In addition, we'll have a website up and running to get word out, information out to the residents. At the community meetings, Clarion has proposed a number of different ways to interact with residents, and we'll work through those in this first month on exactly what that'll look like. Darcy White is here from Clarion, and if the board has any questions for her, she's more than happy to come up and speak to the board. If you'd like, let's see. I think that was
Great.
it.
Thank you. Questions? Trustee Gagos.
Yeah, I have a question. You said in the pros and cons, in the cons there was one other company that came in at less than 149. I was wondering what that price was.
Yeah, and I apologize because in the packet we put we put an attachment after the proposal, Clarion's proposal, that has a list of all the companies that submitted proposals and what their pricing was, and I can go through.
Or
that.
at least the final 4, maybe.
Right. So let me just get to that real quick. It's a long proposal. Sorry. There we go. So Clarion was at 149,000. Let's see. Winston Associates was at 150,000. The Orion Planning Group was at 159,000. And then Design Workshop was at 149,000.
What was the lowest one, though?
It was Design Workshop at $149,132.
Of the 12?
So really $500 difference?
Yeah.
That was the lowest of the 12?
Oh, no, of the 4. The lowest of the
Of the top
12
4, I see.
was $94,466.
You know, that was eliminated because the price sounds right, but
It does, but in going, we want to make sure that the companies that we selected for the Final 4 had a good understanding of what we were looking to do, had the resources to do it, and could deliver on time. So those are, I mean, we typically, a comprehensive plan, you like to do in a year, and not, but 6 months is what we're trying to get this one done in, so.
okay.
Other questions? I had a couple. So, comment regarding that particular issue. This is probably our last big comprehensive plan review. So, this would be one that we want to make sure that we
Done right.
do right. Exactly.
I agree.
And so, the number of community meetings, I was in the packet. You said there were several, and I probably just missed that.
Yeah,
How many?
4.
4 community meetings.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and they'll be scheduled here, or maybe be able
Yeah.
to move them around, or do you need to be here?
we'll look at doing them up at the schools like we did, at least 1 or 2. At each of the schools, I think, makes
Right.
sense. And then probably 2 here. unless there's a third location or a fourth that we come up with. But
Okay.
that's what we were thinking.
Trustee Williams? I had a couple, but if it's related to this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how many did we do the last time? Public meetings.
I don't remember off the top of my head, no. But it's about that range. It could be from 4 to 6 is typically, what we've done in the past. In 2006, we didn't hire an outside consultant to help us. We did it all in-house. And so we did a lot of them here.
That was my other question. Who did the comp plan in 2001 and 2006?
2001 was a company called R&L, which is based, I think, out of Denver. And then 2006, it was in-house staff.
No, that's fine. So there was some note that we would need traffic consultants to maybe look at some of this. Do we have any ability in-house to look at any of that traffic?
Yeah, we'll work with Alex, and his workload is quickly rising, as you can imagine. So that's why we thought that
I like to dump things onto town staff, so thank you.
So Alex has a great knowledge of the town already, so that's good. And then we thought we'd use LSC because they have a wonderful understanding of the town and our issues as well. And when we need additional resources, we can pull from them.
Okay. And then what will be the nexus or the flow of information between the PD process that we're talking about as well as the comprehensive plan, since they're going to be obviously significantly affected by one or the other?
We had a pretty good discussion with Clarion about that, and I think the thought is we wouldn't focus a lot of time on the comprehensive plan on that piece of property if the PD, because that would be going in parallel tracks. So
is it anticipated that the PD, not approval, but the PD discussion process will be completed prior to the planning, the comprehensive plan?
I wouldn't say prior to, I would say
About the same, right?
yeah, about the same
Because
time.
I would want to make sure that I don't want to have one speak to one particular issue and not have it reflected in the other.
Right,
You want to make sure that they're similar,
So Clarion and working with staff will keep track of what's going on with the PD process and make sure that that's reflected in the comprehensive plan.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I had. Trustee Williams?
How many public meetings will we have for the PD process for the town center?
Well, 2 for sure, because those are required out of the code. But in addition to that, you could have anywhere from 2 to 4 more on top of that, I would imagine. Just work session type meetings.
And how are we going to delineate that from the comp plan process and keeping that separate? Or how are we going to make it simple for residents to attend both?
Well, scheduling is we need to hire somebody to do all the scheduling just for this year, but
Phyllis can handle it.
we will have to make sure they're on, not on the same night, of course, and try not to have them on the same week as well. So
My only concern with that is if we're going to have all these different public meetings, it's going to be difficult for residents to determine which ones are important to come to, because they're not going to come to all of them. And so I'm just wondering how we're going to go about making both processes in the public eye equally important.
Well, we'll just have to put out as much information as we can on both projects, and then the residents will have to decide which issue they want to. And the nice thing about having multiple meetings is it's not like we're going to have one meeting on the comprehensive plan and they've lost their chance. We'll have 4 at least, And if they miss one meeting, they can always come to the second or the third one and they can submit comments through the website as well.
Or they can be completely confused and be at, the PD process for the town center and be talking about the comp plan.
Well,
We'll make sure that
You
doesn't
know that.
happen. I don't,
You know it well.
If they don't read the title of the information that's sent out, maybe, I guess you could have some.
that's their
But I mean,
responsibility. That's-
unless you're an elected official or you're incredibly adept at all these different committees and you're highly political, you probably won't know the difference of what the two are.
I kind of disagree with that. I think people can read and make up their own minds. This is a comp plan. I'm interested in that. This is the town center. I'm not interested in that. And show up. It's whatever once they.
And we'll work to have a good description. Like we send information out on a meeting that's upcoming. We'll have, try to have a good description of what this meeting's about and what it entails.
I mean, I'm not deterring any of this. What I'm doing is just awareness, so that we at least have a plan for both.
Trustee Skomats?
So I think, for me, one of the most important parts of this process is how well the firm is at getting people to attend and getting productive and inclusive public comment. And I just wondered if, when you called around for references, this firm was strongly recommended in that respect.
They were strongly recommended, yep. They've done work for the city of Fort Collins, Longmont, Erie, Arvada, Wheat Ridge. So, I mean, they've got, and we contacted several of those cities, and where they were highly recommended.
And it's hard to imagine, I mean, I remember when you introduced them at the other meeting, that you mentioned all those cities. In some kinds of work, that ends up being sort of cookie cutter work. I think in this kind of a project, that's pretty hard to be cookie cutter.
Right, yeah.
When you're talking about public input. And so, to me, the crux of the issue is: have they got a really good technique for getting that input? And that's really my question. And is that what the recommenders said?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Any public comment regarding this?
Chris, did you have?
I just wanted to point out that Chris Strapinski's involved in this from Greenplay.
Potentially, yeah. If we
And
need,
she's done several events for us here with the park and stuff,
Right, yeah.
outreach. So that's
Clarion they brought her on board in case they thought they needed her, and we'll kind of discuss that as we go through the process.
George, Governor. Does this include the plot of lots in the town of Superior? Or include?
The comprehensive plan will cover everything that's within our planning area, so it wouldn't, so it'll be all the plots and things that might not even be in the town of Superior yet, but are anticipated to be included, so it's the whole area.
How many parcels do we have that we got to look at? That we got to spend $150,000 on when we've been over this and been over this for a good many times. You've been involved in it, everybody behind this board has.
So
How
the
many we
areas
got to
would be on
change for that amount of money?
Be on 76th Street. It would be part of the town center. It would be potentially what happens with the school site, what would potentially happen on Calmonte, what would potentially happen on the Richmond site, and any transportation improvements to roads. So it's actually a pretty big project. Even I understand where you're coming from. We don't want to spend money if we just did this, but I think that there's enough change that it will be important.
We've done this before, Mayor. We've already got 76th Street just 3 or 4 years ago when the storage units wanted to come in. We discussed that time and time again.
I suspect there might be some changes.
Well,
I'd think twice about this before. Why can't we do it in-house? Period.
Trustee Williams?
also, just because we have the Jefferson Parkway toll road that could possibly impact our town, we do need to look at our entire traffic plan for our town, not just McCaslin and calming McCaslin or what we want to do with the future for that, but the entire town and how that might impact or not impact. So I think that that's an important component of this comp plan review, which is different than we've done in the past.
Trustee Pennington?
In the beginning of the presentation, I read that because we have done the previous ones in 01 and 06, I think, we weren't going to reinvent the wheel and go back to all those spots. But I did want to encourage at least a little bit of work with our residents on the issue of core values and how our residents define this community. I guess I didn't accept the statement that was made in here that we know our core values and thereby don't have to revisit that issue. Since 2006, we have a lot of influx and outflux in this community, and at least like us to reinforce that we're all on the same page as far as what we want this community to look like and be to all of us. So that was one. I am sure this went through a great vetting process, but when I read here that it was town staff and another gentleman who basically works as staff who did the vetting, it just comes to mind that perhaps that's a place to incorporate the Planning Commission chairman, the ProStac chair, the OSAC chair, and or maybe a representative of the board. I don't, in terms of what some of these, I'm particularly interested in how resident groups would select a company like for this huge process. So it's just my point of view. I'm sure staff did a fantastic job, but where we have a chairman to draw from, I'd sort of be interested in how they viewed this as well.
Trustee Gregoris?
Well, I think this is one of the few times, Trustee Pennington and I disagree on this. I think this is the staff's responsibility to make that choice, and it's not up to committees to do that.
Oh, I didn't say committees. I just wanted perhaps a committee or two representative in the process.
Okay, that's one of those areas, like you say, that we'll agree to disagree. Trustee Goins?
I just feel that it's in town staff to recommend to the board and then in the board's hands. And then after that, the Planning Commission has full input, just like the town board, but the full decision lies with the town board.
So additional board comments or questions? Public comment regarding this? If not, then entertain a motion. Trustee
Yes,
Gregoris?
to approve Town of Superior Resolution R-23, Series 2012, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement between the town and Clary and Associates to facilitate the 2012 Comprehensive Plan update.
Motion by Trustee Gregoris, second by Trustee Skumatz. Further discussion? Phyllis?
Pennington,
Yes.
Skumatz,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Muckle,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Gregoris.
Yes.
Great, thanks very much. Looking forward to this. It's can be sometimes a little dry, but it's this is going to be a very important guiding document because we don't have a lot of space left, and so thank you. That brings us to item number 9, adoption and approval of a resolution naming the 3 Parks project site. Mr. Magley?
Thanks, Mayor. The 3 Parks project was completed last year with a lot of hard work from volunteers and committees and staff time, and we still don't have a name other than the unofficial.
3 parks.
Unofficial
That
3
is
Parks,
a name,
right?
right?
Yeah. So we did a competition, started late last year, asking residents to submit ideas for park names. Collected a bunch of names, and then asked for ProStac and the Historic Commission to take a look at those, try to narrow it down, and I think they've come up with 3, recommending the possibility of 3 names. And ProStac, Jim Payne, the chairman, is here, and he has some additional information for the
Yes,
board.
good evening, and Larry Dorsey from Chair of the Historical Commission is here, and I'll just give you a brief background on how we got here. The park facilities were essentially completed late last fall. As you know, we then had the creek stabilization work, and we had to wait for the bridge to go in and so forth. So it's really hasn't been seen by many people in its fully complete state yet. But it had 2 working names. 3 Parks was one of them. Community Park East was another, you may recall. not everyone was happy with those as permanent names, so we started a process to get input for names. There was a contest that ran over 5 months and had 65 responses that we worked with, and in that process we were screening in names for the entire area, and then we began with those 65 names. We did some screening out, and we screened out anything with 3 in it, because as obvious as that was, and I'd say that was the bulk of the names that we got, there's every possibility there could be an additional amenity there. So it was decided to rule out the 3 variations. We ruled out Honey Creek because we found out what it really means, and which, if you don't know, it's a euphemism for sewage. The sewage plant, of course, is down that road. And in fact, one little sidebar of this is I would recommend that we look at renaming that road at some point, since it now goes through one of our premier parks. And then we ruled out Rock Creek itself because we didn't want it to appear that it was a Rock Creek amenity, although we did entertain on Rock Creek, because it physically is on Rock Creek. But as it turns out, that really wasn't one that came to the final suggestions. So we also got a lot of historical related suggestions, and this was partially because right in the middle of this contest, the tombstone tour through the cemetery occurred. So that led a lot of people to put 2 and 2 together, and everybody liked the idea of an historical reference for this, and provided in your packet is what we looked at. But there really were 3 possibilities that came out of that. The Autry, which is a family name that once owned that land, and it was one of the founding families of the town of Superior. The Hake family, which is, I guess, generally recognized to be the founding family of Superior, if there is one, going back to the early 1900s, and some use of the word miners, because at one time that, of course, was a coal mining area. And at that point we said, we don't have this expertise. We consulted with the Historical Commission. I attended one of their meetings, and they very, very enthusiastically got involved in the project and gave us their feedback, which is how we got those 3 finalists, Autry, Hake, and Miners. And then we looked at other names that might work. Did we want to call it a park? People suggested various names that might have some interest. And the ones that came out of that were Creekside and Wilds and of course Park. So we had a small number of variations to work with. And ProStack pretty clearly liked, I think unanimously would be the word, the Autry name, and thought it was the most appropriate because the Autry family had owned that land. So historically we decided on Autry and looped back with Larry Dorsey and Historical Commission, and that was their preference too, because of for that reason of their having owned the land. So we then put those together with a couple of names that had evolved to go with it, and went back to the committee. So to make a long story short, we ended up with 3 variations, and when ProStack, we didn't actually consider it a vote. We just went around by email, but it actually was fairly split over Autry Park and Autry Creekside Park, and then one variation on that would be Autry Creekside Parks, because there is the issue of what are we actually considering the park? I mean, there are 3 facilities: Superior Bike Park, Superior Dog Park, Superior Disc Golf Course. We look at those as the parks. Is the whole area a park? What's going to happen in the future? So one solution we thought we put before you is to use the plural and call that area Autry Creekside Parks. But at any rate, they're very close variations. We were all, huddled right around those same basic variations. And rather than push it to a preference within ProStack, we thought it was appropriate just to pass those to you and let you choose what you liked. And Larry's here if you have any questions about the historical. There is a question about, which came up about the procedure for naming things with families and historical names and memorials and so forth. And another little sidebar of this process is that we like working together, the two committees, and we would entertain maybe looking at a process at some point where we'd get the right people involved, ProStack, Historical Commission, and others, to sort of look through the names in the town that might be candidates for naming of parks and non-parks and other things in the future, and sort of prepare for that so we have some long-range view of where that might go. So we put before you the three names, and if you have any questions on the historical part, Larry's here to answer them.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, I'm delighted that you included the Historical Commission, and that collaborative effort is exactly what I like seeing in this town, so thank you for doing that, number one. Second question is, Autry Park is spelled differently than Autry Creekside Parks. Why is that? There's an EY and there's a Y, and there's a...
Not in
the way...
Not in what I presented, so maybe there's a typo.
So all the names have R-E-Y, most of them?
R-E-Y, yes.
That is correct, okay, so, but Autry Park has just Y, I was...
Oh, I see on the second page of mine.
Yeah.
There's sorry, typo.
So what's the correct?
EY.
Trustee Skumatz?
I just wanted to hear what Mr. Dorsey had to say about it.
Well, excuse me, in doing some research...
Sorry, name, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm sorry, Larry Dorsey, 940 Riverbend, Superior, Chair of the Historical Commission. And I've got an old map here. It's called the Willits map, which is a farm map that was produced back in, this one is in 1899. It's got all the farms labeled on there, the plots of land, sections and what have you, and the owners' names are on the maps. And so there's the Autry name. It appears to me, just looking at this map, that the Rock Creek goes right through what was Autry property. And then looking at the Superior Folk History book, it indicates that William C. Autry came to the area in 1870 as a homesteader, and then eventually added another 80 acres to his holdings, and eventually 320 acres. It says here, railroad land, and I don't know exactly what that means. And then an additional historical perspective is that he married Zelda Hake, the daughter of William and Emmeline Hake. And so they're early on farmers. It looks like, based on this folk history, that he was a cattle raiser, and so involved early on in Superior's history, and then by marriage tied into the founding family.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Larry.
So he was, they owned the section out there? Is that, as the homesteaders, is that right?
Well, it looks like it wasn't a full section. It looks like it was...
Or purchased up to
Yeah.
the section amount?
I don't know if it's even a whole section. It looked like it's 320 acres in one chunk, and then
640,
the other
yeah.
ones are less than that. So, but he's got some real distinct. His name is distinctly on a lot of the properties right around and including the area where the creek runs through that park site.
Got it, thank you. Trustee Williams, Trustee Gutierrez?
So if we are to choose this name, I'm hoping that the Historical Commission could come up with maybe the map and the historical significance and some kind of plaque that we could put at the park so that people aren't going, Autry? Who's Autry?
There'll be an interpretive sign as we have at all facilities.
Okay.
Yeah, we've already had talked about putting up an interpretive sign like the ones at Asti Park, Grassy
Perfect.
Park, that sort of thing. Yes.
Wonderful.
Just in terms of process, are we going to vote here tonight, one of these three, and pass the resolution? Okay.
Trustee Pennington?
I think Jim raises a good point, whether or not there's a perception of this as one park or three amenities within one park, or is this three parks? actually wouldn't have considered the plural form until I read this memo, so I don't know if anybody has a viewpoint on that. Larry, you too. Jim, you too.
I sort of like for that reason, archery parks, but I mostly included it just to give you that option, depending on the way the board sees it. We're all happy with any of these, and everybody in the committee made it pretty clear that any of these variations would be fine. So it really is up to you.
And Jim, can I ask you something? Is there another option to just call it Autry Parks without the creek side?
Yeah, you could do that too.
That's
Absolutely.
the fourth option, perhaps?
You could do that too.
Trustee Skumatz.
And I will say that if you want to really, parse this, that there was one more vote for Creekside than for just Autry. So there were 3 people that said Autry, keep it simple, and there were 4 people that said, no, we like Autry Creekside. And then there was Autry Creekside Parks, but that's really splitting hairs.
Okay.
I liked the Autry Creekside, and I don't care if it's park or parks, but I like the Creekside because I like to remind people there is a creek down there. It's not just a honey thing. And just to remind people that that's a really important amenity for town, and to sort of serve as a reminder, people go, Autry, where's that? But Creekside sort of brings them back down. So I think the Creekside's an important part of the name.
And all 3 of them are literally right on the creek.
Let's see. My thought just about that, and I know there's others, but I think if we call it Autry Creekside Park, people then just call it, well, I'm going to go to the Creekside Park and forget about the Autry part. So I think keeping it simple might be helpful.
That's a good point.
Trustee Williams and Trustee Gregorus.
And I like the Autry Creekside Park as well, for the exact same reasons as Lisa just mentioned, and also as a directional name so that you know where the park is, which Lisa already mentioned. So for me, that worked well.
If I may just point out, because I'm not sure if everyone's seen it, but with the substantial reclamation and stabilization of the creek, it really is a central asset of that land now, and with the bridge over it and everything else. So I just suggest you keep that in mind.
And although I appreciate that word, I think in terms of people remembering and saying it out loud, where do you want to go? Let's go to Autry Park. I think the simplicity of that makes it easy to remember, and I agree with the mayor that I think once Creekside is in, the name Autry, the historical name Autry, is going to be dropped. So I'm...
You're heading exactly where Prostack ended.
Well, that's how I feel.
Oh, my goodness.
That was my preference to Autry Park. Very, very simple, easy to remember.
It's up to you now.
Well, I'm actually going to raise a different specter of this because I'm still deciding here. I like the ring of Autry Creekside, and I like the fact that it does convey a creek, but I haven't yet decided. But when I read this, I thought, okay, so if there's a creek there, have we put any picnic tables under some nice shade trees at the creek? So if I go there, I can actually sit at these picnic tables under the shade and watch the creek ripple down.
No, but you can do that in the dog park.
No, I don't want to sit in the dog park and have a picnic lunch.
Well, there are...
And I don't want to sit with the kids at the other place. I want to sit on this lovely creek at my picnic table.
Well, there are picnic tables and around the bike park. There are picnic tables throughout, 1 or 2 throughout the... Throughout the disc golf
Park.
course,
Yeah.
and of course there are tables in, and I think there's one just outside the dog park. But
How about under a shade tree at the creek?
Is there a specific
We have a
location?
buffer.
There's a nice little curve in there.
And we took great pains to work out that buffer.
So, Larry, what I'm going to ask is there seems to be a little more traction for creating a bequeath and memorial type of program. So maybe we could put the acquisition of a picnic table for Autry whatever as one of the bequeath and memorial possibilities.
Put that on our list.
While we're here.
So do you want a tree
Okay.
planted as a memorial?
No, I want a picnic table as a memorial or a bench.
I mean, I propose we name it Autry Park.
So I tend to agree. I just want to see if there's any other public comment regarding this.
George, how do you
Any
feel?
long-standing members in the community?
Do you guys have some input? I mean, it'd be helpful. You guys are long.
You like Autry or Autry Creekside?
There you go.
And George said that at the mic, and that was George
That's the
Kuffner.
unofficial
Thank you.
vote. That's the tie, you're the tiebreaker.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Well, it could be 4-2.
Okay.
Anyway,
What is your vote?
She's not sure yet. I propose Autry Park. Chris and the mayor will get 3 votes. That's where we're stand right now. Potentially
You mean
4.
each get 1 vote?
Yes. Yes, 3 votes total. Yes. George, you're. No, you're not. You're not getting involved.
Martin, Matt,
You're the
Sandy, you
What
have a
was
vote?
what was the historical commissions? Did they have one out of these 3?
The commission didn't take a stand on it. At the time, I think they still had, ProStack still had a large array of choices at that time. So I'm thinking that just intuitively that the Autry Park would be the first choice. But I can't say that definitely.
Right. Thank you.
Can we have a comment, I think?
Yeah, I'm Sandy Hammerly, 2855 Rock Creek Circle in the Summit at Rock Creek, number 214. I am on ProStack, and I actually am one of the people on ProStack who supported Autry Park. I am concerned that if we go with Autry Creekside, we will lose the word Autry. And we are very, very fortunate in this community that we have an outstanding and cool history for this community. And I would like to see us do more of naming the parks, not just in Old Town, but throughout the community. Let's embrace the historical complex or history of the community, and I'd like to see us go with Autry Park. But if you go with the other, I'll be fine too. But my personal preference was for Autry Park.
Why don't we give the liaison 2 votes?
I'm up to it.
So we can either,
Okay.
Sandy, what's your
Just-
thought?
I
Move
will
on.
go with Autry Park,
Okay,
Okay.
there you go.
So I'll entertain a motion.
just because,
Chris, go
Larry,
ahead.
you're persuasive.
Correct, go ahead.
Read the motion,
I'd like
please.
to make a motion to approve resolution number R-24, Series 2012, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving the naming of the 3 Parks project site, now named Autry Park.
Motion by trustee Hanson, second. Trustee Gurgurus, I think we've had a lot of discussion. All in favor? Hanson, Muckle, Williams, Gurgurus, Pennington, opposed? Skumatz, no?
It's okay.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for, the park is great. Along those lines, can we send the bridge looks fantastic.
No kidding.
awesome.
Yes.
And can we send
Yes.
urban drainage a thank you and some pictures just related to that? So, anything else to come before the board tonight? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.